Hey everyone, welcome to Chicago Node.js. It's pretty cool. If anyone wants to speak, definitely let me know. I've been having trouble finding speakers for this event, and I'm sure everyone doesn't want me to speak every time. It's also a lot of work. But if anyone wants to speak, let me know. It can be lightning talks, it can be demos about a project you're working on, it can be a presentation about how to do something with Node. As long as Node is involved in some way, it's fair game. If anyone's interested in working at Groupon, we're always hiring. You can talk to me about that too if you're interested. And if anyone wants, there's food and drink in the back, but if anyone needs the bathroom, you have to go back out through the main glass doors here, and then there are bathrooms in the hallways by the elevator. So you know. And that's it. So let's welcome Stenio.
So hello everyone, thank you for coming. My name is Stenio Ferreira, and tonight I'm going to talk about Sails.js. Before I start, I'd like to ask for a quick show of hands. How many of you have heard of Sails.js before? Oh, okay. How many of you have actually worked with Sails.js before? Okay, good. Not that many. One of the reasons that I ask is because to show the challenge that I have creating this presentation, because I didn't know to what depth to go into, because some people might be very familiar with these technologies, some might not be aware of them. In order to find a compromise and to be respectful with everyone's time, this presentation will only be an overview of the main points of Sails.js. It should take 20 minutes, but afterwards in the slides there's an appendix where I'm going to further detail of a few of the technologies. So there's going to be links and references. So with that, what is Sails.js? Sails.js is a framework for Node.js, and in this framework it combines several existing technologies. You're going to see a few familiar faces you most likely have worked with or are aware, like Express, Grunt, Socket.io, and perhaps a few that you have not. Just a note, Express, let's say the latest version of Sails is 0.11 and is using Express 3.16 and Socket.io 1.2. Sails, the first commit on GitHub was in 2012, June 2012. On GitHub, last time I checked, there is 166 collaborators in the project, and it's a cool technology. But why should you care? What are the benefits of Sails.js? Depending on your needs, there might be different benefits, but at least for me, there are three main benefits. The first one, it provides turnkey operation for your new development project. So what I mean by that is, if you're starting a new project from scratch, a Node.js project, or if you're not have worked with Node.js recently and you're not aware of the latest technology developments, it might be difficult for you to pick all the different pieces and bundle them together. If you use Sails, you're going to have a really nice framework that's ready for modern applications. The second benefit of Sails is project standardization. So Sails, as you're probably aware, favors convention over configuration. And what that means is if you put things in certain folders and you do things the way that Sails expects you to do, it's going to reward you by making the development easier and more fluid. So if you have developers that's changing, going from one project to the other, it's going to make it easy, the adjustment. And lastly, even though Sails favors convention over configuration, it gives you plenty of flexibility. So if you're not happy with the way things are set with Sails, it's very easy to change. For instance, if you don't like using routes in the singular, it's easy to change in plural, and several other examples. Having said that, is Sails the only alternative you have? No, not really. Sails is going to be great depending on the use case, but in the Node.js ecosystem, there's several alternatives that you might use as well. So this diagram I made because it's something that I wish I had when I was starting developing my project. I started a project early this year, code management solution, and I knew I wanted to use Node for several reasons, but I was baffled with so many technologies, so many different names, I didn't know where to start. So this tries to give an overview of what's out there. So in the bottom we have Node.js, the language, technology we all love, and the reason we are here. It's great, but it requires a lot of hand coding, some repetitive coding. So that's why you're going to use frameworks. Express, Happy, and others go one abstraction level above. So Express, as you know, there's the session for you, there's requests and response objects, so it's easier to code. Happier, it's a similar note as well. It provides a few of the functionalities, but without too much hand holding. And Happy, just as a note, was developed by Walmart Labs. If you go to their website, there's a lot of corporate logos. So I don't know if that means they use in production, but it's there. If that's something that's important for your task, your company, you might want to take a look. One abstraction level above, there's Sails that I'm going to cover in this presentation. And next to it, Loopback. Both of them are based on top of Express. And Loopback, from what I just recently became acquainted with Loopback, my understanding, they follow a similar business model to Red Hat in the sense that they offer open source technology and provide corporate paid support. So if that's a requirement you need, you might want to take a look. And then there's Meteor. I don't know if you guys have had experience with Meteor. Everybody loves Meteor. I started my journey with Meteor, and I was very happy in the beginning, but I found I reached a threshold that was very hard for me to move forward. So Meteor, if you're not aware, provides two-way data binding. So in your view, the model is going to be reflected with the state of the server out of the box. And it has also this great cache, local cache technology, so the user has a better experience, doesn't feel as much the lag. Having said that, the challenge that I faced with Meteor is that when I wanted to add external modules, it was complicated for me. Things are a little bit obscure. I use Node Inspector, which is a debugging tool, and I was lost on what was going on. When I switched to Sails, everything's clear, it's well documented, it's awesome. Having said that, Meteor received $11 million last year from Anderson Horowitz, the investment group. So they're very well founded for certain applications like real-time chat. You might want to take a look. And just briefly, on the client side, you have JavaScript templating engines that I guess you are all aware. If you're not, in the appendix, there are some brief notes about that. But just in summary, you have your HTML page with a few tags that makes it dynamic. There's Ember and Angular, which in your client provides better management of all the complexity in your client. So instead of having sorted JavaScript files and trying to keep a hold of that, Ember and Angular provide a full model view controller framework and routes. The caveat is that it adds complexity to the development, might add. And in the end of the presentation, I'm going to make a brief mention about my experience using these technologies with Sails. And lastly, just a shout out to Yeoman. I don't know if you guys have heard, but I mentioned that one of the benefits of Sails is the turnkey operation. Yeoman is a stub generator for different technologies. So if you want to use, for example, Angular with Sails, there's a community-made generator. It makes starting the project easier. How Sails can be used? From my point of view, Sails can be used two ways, either as a standalone API server or combined with the client. And let me show what I mean by that. As an API server, you have Sails just listening for requests, and you have your clients that are either separate projects or they can even be in separate machines. So Ember Angular clients or even your iOS app can communicate to your Sails server. In order to use Sails that way, it's very easy. You just need 4 commands, like you have your Unix terminal or any other computer, and you run these commands and you have your Sails server. The most important one is Sails generate API user. When you run this one, Sails is going to create your model, your controller, routes to access this, and a local database. So in your client, you can right away do a request like this one, the address / the model and a verb with the information, and it's going to work. Please take note that this is not production ready. There's no tokens, no authentication authorization, but for development purposes, it's very easy. The second way of using Sails is combined with the client. So in the same project, you have Sails, the server, and Sails also has templating engines. So you're going to use the views folder in Sails. So Sails comes as default EJS as the templating engine, but it supports also Jade, Handlebars, Mustache, and several others if you prefer. So if you want to switch, it's very easy to make the switch. In the appendix, there's a mention. So now on the presentation, I'd like to talk about 5 highlights of Sails. So the parts of the technology that I really like and I think are very powerful of Sails. The first one is regarding database. So for database, Sails uses Waterline as the database layer. Waterline is an ORM layer, and what that means is that it abstracts all the SQL or NoSQL logic. Instead, you're dealing with objects, JavaScript objects. So a table is an object or a model, and the columns of the table are going to be the properties of that model. Waterline is agnostic to the database you're going to have under it. It can be all of these, Mongo, Postgre, MySQL, Redis, and others. It supports associations, and you can even do, you can use, for example, 2 different databases, and your models are connected in those 2 different databases. If you're curious about that, if you look at the previous meetup videos, last year, a gentleman here, I don't know if he's here, he did a talk on this feature, and he went to great extent into that, so you might want to take note. And lastly, Waterline offers hooks. So before and after model creation and before and after model authentication. The second technology I'd like to talk about is WebSocket. So Sails comes out of the box with WebSocket support. Whenever you lift the Sails server, you already have a Socket.io server listening. If you have experience with Socket.io, it's pretty simple. On the client, you can subscribe and listen to events. And on the controller, you can register and publish events. If you don't have experience with Socket.io, which was my case, it can be a little bit complicated in the internet. At least for me, I didn't find a lot of good tutorials of Sails using Socket.io. Mainly where to put certain things in the controller or in the config files. So because of that, in the appendix, I made a simple GitHub project using a very simplistic approach to this, but that can give you an understanding of how to use this functionality. Routes. Route is the third highlight that I want to give. So if you follow Sails convention, you can take advantage of 3 types of routes. The first one, RESTful, so your HTML forms can send GET, POST requests, and Sails is going to be listening for those without any coding. Sails also listen to CRUD shortcuts, create, read, update, delete. So you enter those verbs and they're going to work. And lastly, action routes. In your controller, in the export section, any methods that you declare there are automatically going to be available as a route. But wait, you're going to say, isn't that a security concern? Like, shouldn't you have some sort of authorization, authentication? Well, that's why one of the reasons Sails has policies. So policy is logic that you want to run after the route, but before a method in the controller is called. It's very simple to set up. If you follow Sails docs, it's like a breeze to set up. So it's a great thing. And finally, the 5th piece that I want to highlight is Grunt. I don't know if you guys have heard before. It's a task automation solution for Node.js. For those experiencing Ruby, similar to Rake. For those from Java, it's like Ant. You make a list of the tasks that you want executed, and it does its magic. In Sails, Grunt is used to run less and to minify the files in production environment and to clean temp folders and a few other functionalities. So in the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned that I wanted to talk about a few of the challenges that I have with Sails. But before I do that, one challenge that I had was using with Ember in my case. But please keep in mind I didn't have Ember experience, so Ember is complex and that might have been my fault. So if you want to use Angular or Ember with Sails, there's 2 ways. You can set Sails as an API server with those 4 or 5 commands like I mentioned. And then the Ember and Angular separate. Or there are these 2 projects that I am aware, Sane and the Yeoman generator that you can use for best practice. I haven't used either of those, but they're up there. Having said that, once again, please make sure that if you don't have experience with either of those, if they're really necessary for your project. Because in my case, I wasted a month, and when I just switched to Socket.io and jQuery, it solved. Like I just needed the basic functionalities of a two-way data pipeline. And I just want to give a shout out to this technology that I'm planning to add, reinventing.js with Backbone. It seems to offer some of what Angular and Ember do, but with less complexity. So the challenges that I have had, take this with a grain of salt. It might have been my lack of experience, but you be the judge if it's relevant for you. The first one, Sails touts its flexibility and modularity. That's true, but Waterline is a sticking point, the database layer. If you're not happy with Waterline, I haven't tried, but I read online that it might be difficult to switch to Mongoose or something other. You are going to lose the routes functionality, and you might lose. You're going to lose the hooks as well. So it's something to be aware. Why would somebody want to move from Waterline? Waterline supports associations, which is one-to-one, end-to-end. So in my case, for example, I had a quotes model that had an item, and this item had a user. If I want to get the quotes populated with the item, it's easy. But if I want to get this object also populated with the user, it requires some hand coding. It's not as pleasant to do. It's kind of annoying. But having said that, a few of the Waterline adapters allow SQL or NoSQL queries, like a raw query, so you can use that. User management. Last year I was coding in Ruby, and they had this great gem called Device. I don't know if you guys like it. I like it. It's for user authentication authorization. It provides password reset, all those functionalities. Sails doesn't come with anything like that, and I didn't find a very easy project to add yet. So in the appendix, there are a few alternatives that you might look. For example, Passport, everybody knows for authentication. And then there's Sails-out. It seems to have good development, but it doesn't have password reset, something you have to do. Grunt magic. If you're not familiar with Grunt, in the beginning you might struggle a little bit understanding what the hell is going on. Things are just happening. But having said that, it says everything is easy to see. It's clearly listed, and there's a lot of comments. So just go to the Grunt file, and you're going to be aware of the comments. The two situations where I struggle with Grunt magic. The first one is when I was running in production environments. It minifies the JavaScript and CSS files, and then moves them to a min folder. But in that case, my CSS file had a link to an asset, a font, so that screwed everything up, and it took me a while to figure out. The second thing I don't remember, but anyway, just be aware of it. Regarding deployment, if you are experienced with Node.js deployment, it shouldn't be that difficult. I wasn't, and the struggle that I had is that Sails has a Node modules folder. Inside this folder, there's a Sails folder that has another Node module. So it requires npm update or install twice, depending on how you are doing your deployment. Right now, I don't need that, but in the beginning, it was a challenge. And lastly, outdated info. So with any new and developing technology, you're going to find some documentation online or tutorials that might be updated, such as the case of WebSockets. There are some Sailcasts that don't work, and also concerns that Waterline doesn't support association. But the official documents are always current, so that should be fine. And I also wanted to talk about the future of Sails, what's going on with this technology right now. Like I mentioned, it was first committed in 2012, but early this year, the lead developers started a company called Treeline. They offer Sails as a software as a service. So Sails in the back end, and they have a nice front end for developers that don't want to worry about the back end. And they received seed funding from Y Combinator. So there's vested interest in the future of this technology. And lastly, before I go, why I'm here, I have been mentioning about this project that I have been working since the beginning of the year. I have had a lot of small business experience, and I saw a lot of inefficiencies in its process. I'm a guy that believes that processes should be efficient, So I'm working in several little products, like this quote management solution, to solve this problem. If you're interested in that, if you believe in efficiency, come talk to me or go to the website and you can learn more about it. And that's it. Any questions? Yes.
How are you running production? Do you have some other process monitoring to keep it up? Crashes?
Yeah, I use Forever. So I deploy in DigitalOcean, and right now, recently, I just installed a Git server over there. So I push from my computer to DigitalOcean, and there's a hook that sends everything to the file. I need to add a little command to reset, because once it's in production, it's not listening for changes in the file, so it needs to be taken down and taken up. And to deploy in production, instead of sales lift, to do sales lift -- prod. And there's a folder where you can separate the configuration variables for production and for development. Any other questions? So I have a question for you guys. Which library or technology, NPM, whatever do you use for authentication authorization? Is there something that's standard? No?
Custom proprietary stuff.
Custom.
I don't know what the real standard is.
I kind of wanted to know the answer to that myself.
Yeah, so for sales, I saw, so if you go to the GitHub page of sales, there's I forgot the name, there's like a chat of that, Gitter, and that's where the developers use to chat, and even in the appendix, I mentioned if you have advanced questions, that's the place to go. And they have somebody asked the question, and they mentioned sales-out. So, like I said, it doesn't provide password reset, but I guess I'll need to spend 1 hour, 2 hours to do that. And like I said, I'm going to post, so this is the appendix. These are a few suggestions that I'm aware for user management. This talks about the folder structure. Waterline, how do you populate? Surprisingly, I find it hard to find this information. How the JavaScript templating engine works inside Sales, the one that comes default, the EG.js. A few view considerations. For me, this would have saved a week of research if I had it in the beginning. Just a brief mention, if you guys are not familiar with Express, how controllers work. And this is the link to the Socket.io example, GitHub. And Sales has this great folder called config. There's all these cool configuration variables that you can change at your leisure. For instance, if you want your sessions to be recorded locally or in a MongoDB or in Redis. Oh, and for testing, Sales comes with Motion. That's it.
GitHub again?
You can see on the presentation when I upload, but it's my first name. 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
Anyone else decide to give a demo of some sort? A demo of something you're working on? I did want to mention, I don't know if everyone heard or not, but IO.js decided to join the Node Foundation officially, so that's pretty exciting. So there'll no longer be this weird forking community. So we're pretty excited about that. Overall, I think the fork was a great idea and effective the right kind of change. So hopefully going forward, it'll be a stronger Node community in general. So I'm going to talk about this Node module that I've written called subprocess. And the best way to think about this is, if anyone's familiar, in Node I use the async module a lot because it provides a lot of useful functions for dealing with asynchronous control flow in different ways. So when you find yourself wanting to run a map over an array, but you really need to run a map over an array of callbacks that do things, then you reach for async. Like that's how I deal with that. So there's this really useful function. I have no idea what that was. Called async.auto. And this, you can give it an object that has keys and the values are callbacks, where the key is some identifier, and then the value can be actually a callback or an array. There we go. So in this longer example. So there's this key get data, and then there's this other key write file, and these are two separate calls you want to make. But write file depends on get data and make folder. So it just figures everything else, all the dependencies, and executes in parallel what can be parallel and blocks what has to be blocked. But it just does it for you. You just mark which depends on which other item. So this is incredibly useful if you need to make several different asynchronous calls, and some of them depend on others and some don't.
Real quick.
Yeah.
So, quick question. So does that have specific use cases in mind, or is it good in just general, or is it like specific things that it's limited to?
It's good in general. The goal of this module is just to give you these types of control flow and iteration, but in an asynchronous world. So this is useful for anything. That function can literally do anything. The function receives a callback to let it know when it's done. And then the values you pass to that callback then get passed to, you can see this results variable. Mm-hmm. That's going to have a key for each dependency, and then the value, whatever it returned, is that value. So this is just a really good general library and general function for managing this. I use this a lot. It's really great. But there's a different use case that you could use this for, but you have to do a bunch more manual work. So a more specific use case I've written a module for, which is starting up processes. So in Node, I often find the need to fire up multiple different processes that need to communicate with each other. And a lot of times I want the parent process to keep track of things, and like if one of them goes down, just take the whole thing down so I don't have orphan processes. And you can do that, but you have to end up adding a lot of your own hooks and special logic for spawning those processes. So this is a module that basically async autos your process generation. So again, you can see that there are keys, and now the value is always an object. There's no longer a function or array. You explicitly declare what it depends on. I like this a little bit better than just it's a string and an array. And that's another process name. It can be an array of them. So it knows to wait until those have started and said they're ready. There's logic for checking to see if things are ready. Command and command args are there just for what you're starting. This does not have to be a node process at all, but it could be. The ports you expect that process to listen on. If you don't specify this, it will pick a random high available port. And you can see there's a little bit of interpolation you can do. So I can tell it, just run on a random high port. I don't care what it is, but lets the process know what it is. And you can specify where standard out and standard error should go, and stuff like that. So there's also this verification process. So by default, it's just going to check that something is listening on that port, and if it is, then it says it's ready. And then it knows that anything depending on this process, you can then start up that process. But you can also add custom verification functions. Maybe it's an API server and you want to hit a specific URL and expect a specific response to know that it's healthy and up. You can implement that here in this callback. So you make one of these objects per process, and you just mark the dependencies, and it just figures it all out. It starts all the processes, it waits for the dependencies to be ready, and it just works. And then this is an example of execution. You get a callback with an error, and then processes where each key name is a key on here on this object, and then a slightly modified process object is the results of the value. So you can mess with it. It also does useful things like there's this shortcut method if you want to kill all the processes due to some other trigger in the parent process, but all of them automatically register on uncaught exception so that they will kill all of the whole group as well. That's a common use case I have for this type of thing. And then just some more detailed examples down here. where you're starting a service and you have an application that depends on that service, and you have a special request. You want to request status and assert that the status code is 200. And that's about it. I think this is really neat. So I'm still doing some work on it. I want to add, right now I'm working on a feature where instead of just the ports that you're given, you could actually interpolate the port of any service. So I could say, here maybe the name's a little port, but like service.port instead of port. Because port refers to the ports here, which is either auto-generated or you specify it. But if anyone other has ideas for what would make this more useful, definitely let me know. But it's on my public GitHub under subprocess. And the NPM module name is just that string subprocess as well. Do you have any questions?
Does it? Sorry if I missed it, but does it handle like if one of the processes that's dependent like crashes? Is it pulling process?
Yes.
So how does it handle that?
That's a good question. So there is it polls, so that's what the interval is, every 100 milliseconds by default. And then there's a timeout. If it doesn't see it by the timeout, it stops everything, it kills everything that started, and in this callback you'll get an error. If one of those individual processes crashes, it knows because this parent spawned the process, so it has reference to it. So it knows that when it exits, something happened, and it knows that if I'm still waiting for other things to start up, then something's wrong. So it knows to kill everything. And you'll get an error in that callback at the bottom as well.
So it doesn't try to restart anything?
No, there's no restart mechanism. This is just a self-contained, like, start it up. If something breaks, sort of treating it all as one process.
Yeah.
And then if you want to wrap that in some sort of restart, that's fine. But that felt a little out of scope for just this module.
Yep.
Other questions? Cool. We can find it on GitHub. Let me know if you have ideas on what would make it better, or if you use it and find a bug. Totally. I definitely, it's version 0.2 right now. I definitely bump things to 1.0 when people start using them. I'm not actually using this yet. I'm working on that with one other feature before I do. And then once I do, I'll bump it to 1. But if other people are using it, it seems to work. I'll bump it to 1 right away. But I don't like things that just sit around at like 0.57. Like, people are using this in production. Just call it 1.0 and get some semantic versioning of it. Anyway. But yeah, async auto for processes. I think that's actually the description. Yeah, async auto for processes. Okay, so that was my demo. No one else has a demo? No? Okay, that's fine. So the only other thing I wanted to talk about is what people are interested in getting out of this meetup. Like I mentioned before, we have trouble finding speakers. And I'd rather not like cancel it unless we find a speaker or something. So if there's something else we can do, or some way we can find more speakers, or if anyone has any ideas, let's chat about them now.
What about the idea of having almost like workshops or like split up groups where people just kind of work on what they want to work on?
Sure, like a project night or something.
Yeah, exactly. Like a hack night, essentially, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't like to call them hack nights because the term hack is loaded and exclusionary. But we call them project nights. Same idea. Yeah, we could totally do that if people are interested. Do a lot of, like, how would we structure it? Like, people could come up and pitch the projects they're working on. If someone wanted to work with them, they could just pair for a bit or form a group.
Or maybe they could put up on the board the questions they have. I mean, there's a couple different ways to run it, right? Depending on what people want to get out of it.
Right.
I think it's trying to make sure that people actually want to kind of come here and work at the time, right?
I think it'd be good to do that before the actual meetup too, so that people like were on the fence about maybe they didn't know if they wanted to participate in anything. They could, scan the list and figure out if there was something they wanted to help out with or something.
Nice. Oh, it would be in the meetup description.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, we do that.
And that takes it off of you having to prepare stuff too.
That would be cool. Yeah, we could do that. That could be like a sensible fallback. Like if there's no speaker as of maybe like 2 weeks before or something, say it's a project night. List your projects. Sounds good. Do people, like if we did one right now, would people have projects they wanted to work on or solicits? It could even be like, hey, look through my code and let me know what you think. That's new.
I mean, I'd be curious, but that may just be me.
I mean, I always have random node modules to work on. I'd be down for stuff like that. How many people would have like a project they would put on the list? Raise your hand. 8, 4. An open source project, ideally. Yeah, so if we had enough and everyone else was interested, or you just wanted to take this time to like start something, and you could always ask the room questions if you had them. That would be fine too.
I think the only concern is how to make it a structure, like to make it that we can hear with an objective and we get it accomplished. Or that's not the objective, it's the structure, I guess.
Yeah, I think having a goal is good. The goal could be like, hey, someone else come and review my project code or structure, and give me some feedback. The goal could be, let's pair on this small feature. But yeah, having a goal is good. I don't know how to have like one overarching goal for the night for everyone, but I think it's important.
Another thing regarding topics that at least I would like to see is something about deployment. I don't find a lot of things related to deployment online. Recently, I read about Ansible, so you can manage your configuration of your server. And a friend of mine says he prefers that over Docker. So my plan was to study that a little more, but I don't know if I'm going to have a lot of time. If anybody knows about that, I'll be curious to learn more about that technology.
Yeah, as far as I know, Docker by itself isn't a deployment strategy.
It's like it's just containerization, right?
Right. It's just
I'm pretty sure Ansible's like more parallel to like Puppet or Chef or something.
Yeah,
I think,
really?
I'm not totally sure.
yeah, those are more box setup. But even so, like that's not really like in my mind, deployment is more. I'm going to push the code. I want like live rollover across many different boxes where it takes one out of rotation, puts a new one in rotation. If something crashes, then it makes sure that's logged and like restarts that process.
Wasn't there like someone at the last meetup that we had? I came late, so I wasn't sure exactly, but someone who was like talking about, I think something using Docker to deploy, or something like a technology that uses Docker to deploy a service over multiple systems. But I'm not totally sure.
Oh, last time I talked about ESX. Node workshops, Node.js. I don't think that was here.
You might not have been.
I mean, there are systems like CoreOS, which is really Docker-based, although they're moving to a different container, but similar idea. And the goal of that is they have the tooling around that to make it easier. So Docker by itself isn't the deployment strategy, but it's involved. And that seems pretty cool. At Groupon, we use a custom thing, so it wouldn't really be applicable, but it does those types of things. Any other like general topics people are interested in? Like maybe if I had a topic, it'd be easier to find a specific speaker.
I think that's generally a good idea, though, is call for topics if you can't get a call for speakers to go through. So maybe there's somebody that just picks up on that. That would probably happen to me quite often. So more often than I actually have a project to work on, there's probably a topic I could talk about that I wouldn't think of off the top of my head.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
User management?
User management, authentication seemed like another big one. Like how it's the best way to do that. I did remember, I think I've at least heard of people using Passport, the Node module. I have no idea if it's any good, but it seems to be somewhat popular. But
It's okay.
it's okay.
What have you used, if anything, in the past?
Internally, we use a custom thing, so it's not applicable. But it's just like HTTP headers and stuff.
Another topic idea is about promises, different libraries that are available to support promises, like Bluebird, or even more about async, waterfall, like what are the advantages of each, when should I use one or the other.
There's does IOJS have promises yet? Because promises is being added to the native language. That'd also be interesting to talk about. But I don't remember if it was available in IOJS yet or not. Promises. That would be cool. Oh, and when they merge, they're not going to a single release yet. They're still going to have like 4.12 releases and 2.0 or 3.0 releases sort of separately, maintained sort of separately. But I think they do plan to eventually, I think the plan is like IO would be like the real version, and 0.12 would still be in maintenance for long-term support for however long, just for reference.
The last one that I can think, what about design patterns in Node.js? Many things like streams and things like that. There's a right way of using, there's a not so good way of using. So those considerations.
Yeah. That's a good point too. Okay, any other general comments? Ideas? I have another module to talk about. Or we can just go. It works. I like my Node modules. I also made this publishing module called InPub. And since I started this, there have been a few others that have cropped up. But a lot of them seem really specific. Like this is the Grunt publishing module. You can't use it outside of Grunt. This is just generic. You can use it regardless. But it basically runs through all of these steps when you want to publish a new module version, which is pretty cool. But one of the things I want to add that it doesn't have yet, that I found out about not too long ago, is this changelog formats. Described it, keep a changelog. If I could open this page. So this is just a standard because standards are better than spending 2 weeks making a decision. Just use the standard. If you can come up with a really good reason not to use the standard, then you can have the 2-week discussion. Otherwise, just use the standard. And this just seemed like a really great way to format changelogs so that they're human readable, but also because they're in this format, they could be machine readable. But it's just the standard. You don't have to care how it works. Just implement it. So I want to add this because InPub will actually build your changelog for you based on previous commits. Eventually, I wanted to build it based on pull requests through GitHub, but it would build it in this changelog format, which would be pretty cool. Any other questions or comments? Okay, cool. Well, thanks for coming, everybody.